A mirror doesn't lie. But on one ordinary afternoon, it did something no mirror should ever do. It stopped showing the man standing in front of it. He looked closer. He blinked. And for 3 full seconds, Jaafar Jackson didn't see himself. He saw his uncle. That single moment would end up defining the hardest, strangest, most emotional 2 years of his life. This is the story of how a quiet musician nobody expected became the man trusted to bring Michael Jackson back from the dead, on screen in front of the entire world. Some families hand down houses, some hand down businesses. The Jacksons handed down something far heavier, a name that means something to almost every person on earth. Michael Jackson changed music forever, he changed dance forever, but the weight of what he built didn't disappear when he passed away. It landed quietly on the shoulders of the people who loved him most. For Jaafar Jackson, that weight arrived early and never left. He wasn't just a fan watching from a distance, he was family. He grew up hearing stories that never made it into documentaries, watching home movies that never made it online, sitting at dinner tables where Uncle Michael wasn't a legend. He was simply Michael. Nobody could have guessed that decades later, this same boy would be asked to become him. Chapter 2, The Grandmother's Words. Before the fame, before the film, before any of it, there was one moment that still breaks Jaafar's composure every time he talks about it. It happened after his grandmother, Catherine Jackson, saw an early piece of his work. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. A few quiet words of pride from her hit him harder than any review, any headline, any award ever could. He's spoken about it publicly more than once, and every time his voice changes, he slows down. He looks away for a second. Grown men rarely let themselves get emotional on camera. But this is the one subject that cracks through Jaafar's calm exterior almost instantly. It tells you something important before the story even really begins. This was never just a job for him. It was personal from day one. When Jaafar sat down for his first major interview on NBC's morning show, the room was tense before he even said a word. He wasn't just another actor promoting a movie. He was Michael Jackson's nephew, about to play Michael Jackson in front of an audience that had spent decades studying every detail of the man he was portraying. Fans weren't going to simply watch this interview, they were going to dissect it. Then something shifted. Instead of sticking to safe, rehearsed answers about the film, Jaafar opened up about childhood memories most people had never heard. Long afternoons playing games at the family estate, laughing at Neverland, sneaking candy, watching movies with cousins piled onto couches. The tension in the room softened into something warmer. For a few minutes, nobody was thinking about box office numbers or casting controversy. They were just listening to a nephew talk about the uncle he loved. But that warmth came with a price. The more human he seemed, the more the public wanted to know. Could he actually deliver the performance everyone was waiting for? Long before any of this, there was a photograph. In it, a young Jaafar stands beside Michael, dressed in a sparkling jacket, holding a microphone like he already belonged on a stage. Michael's hand rests gently on his nephew's shoulder, not posed, not staged, just two family members sharing a quiet, proud moment. For years, the photo sat quietly in family albums. Then, once casting news broke, it resurfaced everywhere. Fans called it a full circle image. The little boy who once stood in Michael's shadow was about to step directly into his shoes. It's the kind of detail that turns a casting decision into a story, and stories like that don't stay quiet for long. Not every big reveal happens in a serious setting. Sometimes the truth slips out during a laugh. On a late-night talk show appearance with Jimmy Fallon, Jaafar admitted something that surprised even the host. He had only 20 days to learn the Billie Jean choreography before his audition, 20 days to master a routine so iconic that millions of people can spot a single wrong hip movement. He laughed about his early rehearsal footage, admitting it looked nothing like the polished performance that eventually made it into the film. Fallon jumped on the opening immediately, joking that even he wouldn't have made the cut as one of Michael's backup dancers. The audience erupted. For a moment, it felt less like an interview and more like two friends trading embarrassing stories. But underneath the laughter was a very real fact. The timeline for this role was brutal, and Jaafar knew it better than anyone in that room. This is where the story turned strange and deeply human. Months into filming, after hours of prosthetics, wig work, and makeup application from an Oscar-winning team, Jaafar looked into a mirror during a routine break, and he froze. The face staring back wasn't reacting the way his face should react. The eyes felt different. The expression felt borrowed. For a brief, disorienting moment, he wasn't looking at himself. He was looking at Michael. He's described the feeling as unsettling, even a little frightening. Not because it was fake, but because it felt too real. Every hour spent studying movement, tone, and posture had built toward exactly this moment, a transformation so complete that even the person underneath it briefly lost track of who he was looking at. It's one thing to imitate a legend. It's another thing entirely to disappear into one. The red carpet lights up every premiere, But the real stories always happen just off camera. At the Los Angeles premiere, the Jackson family gathered alongside the film's cast to celebrate a project 2 years in the making. Attention naturally gravitated toward Jaafar. Reporters wanted details, and for the first time, he laid out just how far his preparation had gone. Studying old performances frame by frame, memorizing lyrics, breaking down expressions most fans never consciously notice. Co-star Nia Long, who plays Jaafar Jackson, spoke that night about the strength and faith it took to portray a mother who lived through unimaginable public scrutiny. Her words added a layer of emotional weight to a night that already felt heavier than a typical Hollywood premiere. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a family watching one of their own carry something enormous in front of the entire world. Every big transformation has an audience that matters more than the cameras. And for Jaafar, that audience was his own family. Sitting in those premiere seats weren't just industry executives and film critics. They were people who had actually lived through everything the movie was trying to portray. Aunts, uncles, cousins who remembered Michael not as a global icon, but as a brother, a son, a friend who used to sit at the same dinner table they did. For them, watching Jaafar recreate those private, familiar movements wasn't just entertainment. It was something closer to watching a memory come back to life. Several family members have spoken about how surreal certain scenes felt to sit through. A particular tilt of the head, a specific laugh, a familiar way of pausing mid-sentence. Small details that a casual viewer might miss entirely, but details that hit differently for people who actually knew the real man behind them. That kind of reaction carries weight far beyond any box office number or critic's review. It's one thing to convince strangers that a performance feels authentic. It's an entirely different challenge to convince the people who loved the original person the most. And by most accounts, Jaafar didn't just convince them, he moved them. Long before any red carpet, Jaafar was simply a kid with a very complicated last name. As the son of Jermaine Jackson, he grew up surrounded by a legacy so large that most people can't even imagine carrying it. His father tried to shield him from the chaos that always seemed to follow the Jackson name, but some things were impossible to hide. Michael's music played constantly. His stories lived in every family gathering. His presence, even after he was gone, never really left the room. As Jaafar got older, people started noticing something else. The smile, the eyes, small gestures that echoed his uncle in ways that felt almost eerie. What began as quiet family observations eventually spread online, and strangers started comparing a teenager to one of the most famous entertainers who ever lived. Most people would run from that. He had the easiest shortcut in the world sitting right in front of him, and he chose not to take it. Instead of leaning on the Jackson name, Jaafar spent years building a music career that was entirely his own. In 2019, he released his debut single, a smooth R&B track that hinted at his family's musical roots without ever trying to copy them. It was a clear statement. He wasn't interested in becoming an imitation of anyone. He kept releasing music rooted in classic soul rather than chasing whatever trend was dominating the charts that month. His songs didn't break streaming records, and that never seemed to bother him. While plenty of young artists chase viral moments, Jaafar focused on craft, writing, recording, refining, mostly out of the public eye. It looked at the time like the slow and quiet path. Nobody knew it was actually laying the foundation for the biggest opportunity of his life. During a 2019 interview promoting that debut single, Jaafar gave fans a rare, relaxed look at who he actually was, away from any spotlight comparisons. Asked about his favorite song, he named a classic jazz standard, not a Jackson 5 track, not anything tied to his family's catalog. When asked to sing a few lines, he laughed and admitted he couldn't remember them. It was small, human, and completely unscripted. The conversation turned personal from there. He talked about being in a long-term relationship, his love for animals, and life outside of any stage or spotlight. He described his childhood memories with Michael as surprisingly ordinary. A nephew hanging out with an uncle. Nothing more dramatic than that, despite what outsiders assumed. He even revealed that before music, before any of this, he once dreamed of becoming a professional golfer. Life clearly had other plans. But one thing was already obvious in that interview. Jaafar wasn't trying to walk in anyone's footsteps. He was building his own path, one quiet step at a time. For years, the safe road was right there waiting for him. Keep making music, keep growing slowly, keep avoiding the impossible comparison that came with his last name. Then, he was offered the role of playing Michael Jackson in a major biopic, and everything changed in an instant. This wasn't a small opportunity. It was a challenge unlike anything he'd faced before, carrying enormous emotional and professional risk. Saying yes meant stepping away from recording sessions and walking straight into a world of demanding rehearsals, prosthetics, choreography, and constant public scrutiny. He said yes anyway. It wasn't about chasing an easy route to fame. There was nothing easy about this role. It was about accepting a responsibility that very few people would ever willingly take on. With one decision, Jaafar transformed from a rising R&B artist into a performer the entire world was suddenly watching. Before the world found out, one conversation had to happen first. the one with his own father. Jermaine Jackson had spent decades trying to protect his son from the exact kind of scrutiny this role would guarantee. He'd watched the family name bring both incredible opportunity and relentless, invasive pressure. So when Jaafar told him he was seriously considering the role, it wasn't a simple, celebratory conversation. It was heavier than that. Details of that exact exchange have never been fully made public, but Jaafar has hinted in interviews that his father's reaction carried both pride and genuine concern. Pride, because his son was being trusted with something enormous. Concern, because Jermaine understood better than almost anyone what kind of spotlight was about to land on him. In the end, the decision was Jaafar's alone to make. But knowing his father was standing behind him, even while worrying about what lay ahead, gave him something steady to hold on to during the hardest parts of preparation still to come. Family, it turned out, wasn't just the subject of this film. It was the foundation that made attempting it possible in the first place. Here's something most people got completely wrong before filming even started. They assumed Jaafar would simply be handed the role because of his last name. Nearly 2,000 hopefuls competed for the chance to play Michael Jackson. Actors studied old interviews for months. Dancers rehearsed every signature move until their bodies ached. The competition was brutal, and Jaafar had to go through the exact same audition process as every single one of them. No shortcuts, no special treatment. So he went all in. He studied Michael's walk, his posture, his facial expressions, even the quiet pauses between movements that most people never consciously notice. Every tiny detail mattered, because millions of fans already knew Michael so intimately that even the smallest mistake would be spotted instantly. When he finally stepped in front of the camera for his audition, something shifted in the room. The filmmakers stopped seeing Michael's nephew. They started seeing the person who could actually bring the legend back to life. The search for their Michael Jackson was over. But for Jaafar, the real challenge hadn't even started yet. Winning the role was only the beginning. What came next went far beyond anything a typical acting job requires. To truly understand his uncle, Jaafar made an unusual choice. He spent time living and training inside Michael's former bedroom at the family's Havenhurst estate in California. This wasn't a movie set built for cameras. It was a real, deeply personal space filled with decades of memories and family history. Instead of studying Michael from a distance through old footage, Jaafar immersed himself directly in the environment that shaped him. Slowly, the line between rehearsal and everyday life started to blur. When practice sessions ended for the day, the work didn't actually stop. The role had quietly become part of his daily routine, in a way most actors never experience. Most performers leave their characters behind the moment filming wraps for the day. Jaafar couldn't. And by the time he eventually stepped out of that room, the transformation had already gone far deeper than anyone, including him, had expected. The old version of Jaafar had to step aside completely. There was no easing into this role. The moment he accepted it, everything changed. He committed to a transformation process that would consume the next 2 full years of his life. There was no shortcut, no room for excuses, no half measures. He trained relentlessly to master Michael's voice, his physical movements, his facial expressions, and, hardest of all, his emotional presence. Many of the techniques felt uncomfortable at first. Progress came painfully slowly on certain days. But whenever something didn't feel authentic, Jaafar simply kept working until it did. Giving up was never treated as an option. His mission was never to create a copy. He wanted every single movement to feel completely real, never forced, never performed. Day after day, the process reshaped him. The musician who once focused purely on recording songs was quietly evolving into an actor capable of carrying one of the most demanding roles in modern Hollywood. By the end of those 2 years, the difference in him was impossible to miss. If you've made it this far into the story, drop a comment telling us which part of Jaafar's transformation surprised you the most. It genuinely helps more people discover this story. There's a difference between doing an impression and actually delivering a performance, and Jaafar understood that difference from the very beginning. He knew that simply copying Michael's moves, note for note, gesture for gesture, would never be enough to satisfy an audience that had watched the real thing for decades. So instead of memorizing choreography like a checklist, he studied the meaning behind every single movement, the rhythm, the emotion, the intent driving each performance. Piece by piece, he built the character from the inside out rather than the outside in. Balancing raw acting with technical performance became one of his toughest ongoing challenges. Lean too hard into one, and the other would start to feel hollow. Rather than simply recreating Michael's most famous public moments, Jaafar aimed to portray the complete person behind the legend. The extraordinary talent, yes, but also the everyday humanity that rarely made headlines. The pressure of that balancing act was immense, with expectations pouring in from fans across the entire world. Still, he leaned into it, determined to make every single moment on screen feel believable. Surprisingly, the hardest part of this entire process wasn't the look, it was the voice. Michael Jackson's speaking voice was one of the most recognizable sounds in the world. Soft, distinctive, instantly identifiable. A handful of famous lines delivered convincingly would never be enough to sustain an entire film. Audiences would catch every single inconsistency. So Jaafar went to work. He spent countless hours studying old recordings, interviews, and performances, listening carefully to Michael's soft tone, his unusual rhythm, and the subtle way he delivered even the simplest sentences. He practiced his breathing patterns, his timing, his vocal delivery over and over until it stopped feeling like an exercise and started feeling natural. Whenever a line sounded even slightly forced, he reworked it. Whenever the emotion behind a sentence felt wrong, he started over completely. Slowly, something remarkable happened. The voice stopped sounding like an impression and started carrying the same warmth that made Michael's real speaking style so memorable in the first place. By that point, Jaafar wasn't just learning how Michael sounded, he was learning how Michael connected with people, and that understanding changed everything about his performance. Behind every polished performance clip lies something the highlight reels rarely show: exhaustion. Recreating Michael's physicality wasn't just a creative challenge, it was a genuine physical grind. Long days in the makeup chair, followed by hours of intense choreography rehearsal, followed by vocal coaching sessions late into the evening. Jaafar has admitted that some days blurred together completely, with barely enough time to rest before the entire cycle started again. Dancers and choreographers involved in the production have spoken about how demanding Michael's original movement vocabulary actually is. The sharp isolations, the explosive bursts of energy immediately followed by complete stillness, the way his body seemed to defy normal physical limits. Recreating that convincingly, night after night, takes a real toll on joints, muscles, and stamina. There were reportedly days when Jaafar pushed through minor injuries rather than lose momentum in his preparation. It wasn't recklessness, it was the same mindset that seemed to define his entire approach to this role. Every ache, every exhausting rehearsal became just another price to pay for a performance he refused to deliver at anything less than full commitment. Some dance moves are just steps. This one carries the weight of an entire legend. For Jaafar, no single challenge in this entire process felt bigger than Michael's iconic moonwalk. Arguably the single most recognized dance move in entertainment history, instantly familiar to millions of people who have never even seen the full performance it came from. He took nothing for granted. He broke the move down piece by piece, studying every subtle shift of weight, every carefully timed pause. The pressure was constant because everyone already knew exactly what the original was supposed to look like. There was zero room for a version that felt slightly off. So he kept practicing, session after session, until the movement finally felt smooth instead of mechanical. His goal was never to perform a technically correct copy. It was to make the moment feel completely believable on screen, like something happening naturally rather than something being performed. Slowly, the pieces came together, and the moonwalk stopped looking like something he was straining to execute. It began to flow, and one of the single biggest challenges of his entire journey was finally behind him. Rehearsals eventually end. The spotlight doesn't wait for anyone to feel ready. Jaafar was no longer training behind closed doors. He now faced one of the single biggest challenges of the entire film, recreating Michael's legendary 1988 performance of Human Nature at Wembley Stadium. This wasn't just another scene to shoot. Fans had watched that exact performance for decades. Every step, every pause, every subtle expression had already become permanently etched into music history. The pressure attached to this one scene was enormous. Jaafar couldn't hide behind his last name. Every single movement had to feel completely authentic, and every moment had to genuinely respect a performance that fans already knew by heart, frame by frame. He wasn't trying to replace the original performance. He was working to honor it, while somehow bringing it back to life for an entirely new generation that never got to witness it live. The stakes could not have been higher walking into that scene, and after years of preparation, this was finally the moment he'd been building toward the entire time. By this point in filming, the mirror had genuinely stopped showing Jaafar Jackson. The first full makeup test became a defining turning point in the entire production. Hours went into applying prosthetics, styling wigs, and perfecting the smallest physical details, all under the direction of Oscar-winning makeup designer Bill Corso. Rather than covering Jaafar's face completely, Corso's team used careful, subtle adjustments, highlighting the natural similarities he already shared with his uncle instead of hiding them. When Jaafar finally appeared in full costume and makeup, his familiar features seemed to disappear entirely. The transformation had reached a level that reportedly left the crew genuinely stunned. From that point forward, the process became part of his daily routine on set. Taking his seat in the makeup chair each morning, he would watch himself slowly morph into his uncle over the course of several hours. By the time he actually stepped onto set, he wasn't simply preparing to play a role anymore. He was stepping closer to becoming the legend himself. No one carries a role like this completely alone. And for Jaafar, the people standing beside him on set became almost as important as the preparation itself. Coleman Domingo, cast as Joe Jackson, brought decades of acting experience to scenes that demanded enormous emotional precision. Off camera, cast members have described a genuine bond forming between them. Domingo reportedly offered guidance during some of the more emotionally demanding shoot days, treating Jaafar less like a first-time lead and more like a colleague worth investing in. Giuliano Cruivaldi, who portrays Michael during his childhood years, brought his own version of the same pressure Jaafar was facing, except at an even younger age. The two actors, playing the same person across different decades of his life, reportedly spent time comparing notes, studying footage together, and helping each other stay consistent in how they captured Michael's mannerisms across the timeline of the film. That kind of collaboration doesn't show up in trailers or press junkets, but it shapes the final performance in ways audiences rarely get to see. By the time filming wrapped, what started as a professional cast had reportedly become something closer to a genuine support system, one built specifically to help carry the emotional weight of telling this particular story. Doubt can quietly destroy a film long before the cameras ever stop rolling. For director Antoine Fuqua, taking on this project was never going to be simple. Every single scene would face intense scrutiny, and one wrong casting or creative choice could damage the entire film's credibility. But somewhere in the rehearsal process, Fuqua noticed something in Jaafar that couldn't be faked. Genuine, relentless dedication. He saw the endless preparation. He saw the discipline. He saw a real commitment to understanding the role completely rather than simply performing the surface-level version of it. As filming progressed, something noticeably began to shift. Jaafar stopped looking like someone imitating Michael Jackson and started feeling like someone who genuinely stepped into the character. That shift changed the entire atmosphere on set. Fuqua pushed him harder, knowing Jaafar was ready to handle it. Every new challenge was met with even greater determination. The pressure never fully disappeared. Millions of fans were still waiting to compare every single movement. But slowly, doubt inside the production began turning into real confidence. Even the director started to realize this performance was becoming something far beyond an ordinary casting choice. Chapter 21. The Secret Behind the Transformation. The biggest breakthrough in this entire journey didn't happen in a dance studio. It happened while reading pages filled with Michael Jackson's own private thoughts. While promoting the film on The Jennifer Hudson Show in April 2026, Jaafar revealed a surprising layer of his preparation. Alongside co-stars Coleman Domingo and Giuliano Cruivaldi, who portrays Michael's childhood years, Jaafar explained that his research went far beyond choreography and vocal coaching. He studied Michael's personal journals, handwritten notes, poems, and daily affirmations. Those private writings revealed something choreography never could: the actual mindset behind the superstar. They showed his discipline, his creativity, and the quiet determination that fueled everything he built in public. For Jaafar, this part of the process was never about copying dance moves or matching a famous voice. It was about genuinely understanding the person who existed behind the legend in the moments when no cameras were rolling. He's spoken about pouring everything he had into this role: heart, effort, and time, hoping to make his family proud and hoping in some small way to make his uncle proud too. Understanding Michael on that level, though, was still only half the journey. Jaafar still had to prove that all of this preparation could genuinely bring the legend back to life on screen. The waiting eventually had to end, and when it did, the pressure became impossible to escape. When Lionsgate released the first teaser trailer for the film, it instantly became more than a simple movie preview. Within hours, it turned into a full-blown worldwide conversation, quickly becoming one of the biggest trailer moments for any musical biopic in recent memory. The internet reacted immediately and intensely. Fans replayed every single second frame by frame. They slowed down individual movements, studied facial expressions closely, and searched for the smallest possible details that might reveal whether this performance was genuine or forced. They weren't simply watching a trailer for entertainment. They were actively deciding, in real time, whether Jaafar Jackson could truly carry his uncle's legendary legacy. For Jaafar, all of that intense attention meant everything. It confirmed that the entire world was genuinely watching his every move. Every gesture mattered. Every single step counted. Any small mistake could instantly become the center of public discussion. The pressure had officially moved beyond rehearsals and private makeup chairs. The performance was now sitting in front of millions of people, and the world was finally waiting to see whether Jaafar could deliver the moment everyone had spent years hoping for. If this story moved you even a little, hit subscribe. There's a lot more of Jaafar's journey still unfolding, and you won't want to miss where it goes next. No matter how much preparation Jaafar put in, one thing was always going to follow him: comparison. Constant, relentless, sometimes unfair comparison to a man widely considered the greatest entertainer who ever lived. Online, the reactions split almost immediately into two camps. One side praised the physical resemblance, the vocal work, and the sheer dedication visible in every clip that surfaced. The other side remained openly skeptical, arguing that nobody could ever truly recreate something as singular as Michael Jackson. no matter how hard they trained or how much they studied. Jaafar has addressed this tension directly in interviews, admitting that he never expected to satisfy everyone. His goal, he said, was never to erase doubt completely. It was to earn respect through the work itself, performance by performance, scene by scene. He understood from the very beginning that some critics would judge him before the film even started, simply because of who his family was. Rather than letting that discourage him, he seemed to use it as fuel. Every skeptical comment became another reason to rehearse one more hour, refine one more scene, study one more piece of footage. Whether or not every critic came around, one thing became increasingly clear as filming progressed. Jaafar wasn't chasing universal approval. He was chasing something that felt true to the man he was portraying and to the family watching him do it. Jaafar Jackson's emotional journey proves something simple but powerful. Legacy isn't something you're simply handed. It's something you have to earn, one uncomfortable rehearsal, one late night, one honest mistake at a time. Every audition, every mirror moment, every hour spent buried in journals and old recordings revealed just how much genuine pressure comes with bringing someone as legendary as Michael Jackson back to life on screen. These weren't just behind-the-scenes stories for a film promotion. They captured something far more human: dedication, family, and the quiet, powerful bond between a legend and the person doing everything he can to honor him properly. And maybe that's the real story here. Not a nephew trying to become his uncle, but a young man trying to make sure the world remembers exactly why that uncle mattered in the first place.